The first half is winding down, and the Atlanta Braves are heading into the final weekend before the All-Star break, looking to finish on a high note and then maybe just recharge their batteries for a few days for the stretch drive that follows. I'm Grant McCauley. He's Chris Willis. This is Battery Power TV. Before we get started, go ahead, hit that thumbs up button right down there. Leave us a like on this episode and make sure you're subscribed and turn on those notifications so that you will know every time we drop a new episode of BPTV. And don't be shy. Go ahead and leave a comment as well. There's a lot to talk about on this edition of the show, as there is every single week. Chris, the Braves are conducting a little business out west. The 4-game stay in Arizona, followed by a 3-game set against the Padres this weekend. And then we will be at the halfway point, as it were, even though mathematically we passed that a little while back. And it's been a strange ride in the first half. That may be the first and biggest understatement of this show, or oversimplification, if you will. But it seems like some of Atlanta's bats could be showing some signs that the best is yet to come for this team, which bodes well since they have pitched as well as they have this year.
Yeah, the offense is starting to show signs of life, which I think is a welcome sight, given the struggles that they've had since the first month of the season. So, I mean, I think it's important that they kind of finish off this Western road trip on a good note and try to build some momentum going into the All-Star break. And because I mean, the trade deadline is going to be right around the corner. I expect them to add some reinforcements. But I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, we're getting to that point here soon where it's just going to be the sprint to the finish line, and it's important to be playing well when you get to that point.
No doubt. And you bring up the trade deadline, something we will touch on quite a few times during the course of this show, even though we're not going to go full scale into all the trade speculation that certainly will follow over the next couple of weeks. But it's a conversation to be had. And let's talk about reunions, because the Braves had one of those this week. Eddie Rosario back with Atlanta after being cut loose by the Washington Nationals. He batted just 183 in 67 games, only 7 home runs for the Nats, and was made expendable following the call-up of slugging prospect James Wood to go ahead and get that era, potentially anyway, started up in D.C. And that aside, the Nationals likely saw Rosario when they signed him as a low-cost bridge. It may have some value at the trade deadline. That simply was not going to be the case after that sluggish start for Rosario, and he was designated for assignment. The Braves, meanwhile, what's that old slogan? They're looking for a few good men. They're looking for a few good outfielders. And there's something to say for that change of scenery, even if it's scenery that Rosario knows very well. And given the state of Atlanta's outfield, the IL stints for Brian Anderson and then Ramon Laureano, it was important that the Braves do something rather than rely on minor league journeymen to fill the void on one of the corner spots. Chris, Rosario could be a bridge or a stopgap, whatever you want to call it, for whatever Alex Anthopoulos could do in a couple of weeks at the trade deadline. But the bottom line is he had to do something, right?
Yeah, I mean, coming home has worked well for Jesse Chavez, so maybe some of that magic could rub off on Eddie Rosario as well. But I mean, I don't think it was a great opportunity to give him a fresh start after the slow start in Washington. Give him 2 or 3 weeks run here up until the deadline. See what you've got, because we know how hot he can get at times. And as you mentioned, I mean, the Braves just really didn't have any depth. I mean, no offense to guys like Forrest Wall and others, but, Luke Williams is another. I mean, if you're running those guys out, those guys are fine bench pieces, but when you're having to run them, one of them out there every single night, it really shows and drags down the offense. So
Yeah.
I like it. Adam Duvall showing some signs of life too. And I mean, I think it's a good thing to get Eddie in there, and let's see what he can do.
Yeah, and since Adam Duvall got that walk-off hit against the Pirates weekend before last, he has shown some serious signs of life, and from the side of dealing with right-handed pitchers, which was such a problem for him. But getting Rosario in this mix, either way, I agree with you, and we agree with me, so I guess we're in agreement here. Let's boil it down to that, the options that the Braves had were far from ideal. But the reason why the Braves have the kind of options that they do is because typically they have the same guys out there just about every single day. And some of the plans and pieces that were put in place simply have not been able to come to fruition for the Braves this year. And obviously the injury setback is the biggest of all. I don't want to jump the gun and go full trade talk here this week, but we know it's around the corner, that trade deadline on July 30th. And even if we don't know what the market is going to look like just yet, because I don't think we know who's going to be sellers at this point. However, it was worth a shot, I think, to see if Rosario could fill the void, as you mentioned, because there are a couple of key outfielders who are done, with Ronald Acuna Jr. for the year. Michael Harris sidelined for a number of weeks, so his return could be coming in the second half as well. And it feels like finding a fit in the outfield is still going to remain at least one of the priorities for Atlanta and Alex Anthopoulos later this month. Interesting thing is, while they love years of control, we know that about Braves trades in the past. See Jared Kelnick, for example. The 2025 outfield is already pretty much set because you have Ronald Acuna Jr. coming back. You have Michael Harris. You have Jared Kelnick. That makes whatever the Braves do here soon an even more fascinating decision if you really start to break it down, Chris, which is what we do on this show.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's much more of a 2021 situation, or even, when they signed or traded for Robbie Grossman. I think we're looking at possibly a guy that's a more of a rental, which is that's a lower price tag too in a lot of sense. Oftentimes at the deadline. So, I think we'll be looking at that because, as you said, I mean, the 2025 outfield, I think we're set. They're set as far as that goes. If they can keep everybody healthy, you may want to add some depth to that. But yeah, I mean, I think we're looking at rental additions here, and preferably one that's gonna be able to provide some offensive punch.
Yeah, you'd certainly like that. In 2021, I know it comes up a lot, and I know we talk about it a lot because some good things happened in that year at the trade deadline, and then a little bit later that season, the best possible thing happened for the Atlanta Braves and winning the World Series. It's not to say that lightning's going to strike twice, but it's also to say that when you've been down this road before, having that experience could give the Braves at least some advantage on knowing how to navigate the uncertainty of going without one of the best players in baseball, which they have done before. Never wanted to do it again. And you hate that Ronald's having to go through it, but the Braves have been able to figure this out. And I would say at this time around, there's a lot more talent than there was on the 2021 club, just based off returning the cast of characters from a year ago, offensively speaking. And I'll just stick a pin in it there because we've spent, I think, all year talking about what this talent is capable of. The question is, can they do it in the second half? And we're all going to find out together. Now, we need to do a little bit of all-star talk because it's coming up here in the next few days. Last year, the Braves sent 8 all-stars up to Seattle. This year, the Braves have 3 all-stars, and it's a completely different group. None of the guys who were there last year are going back. Chris Sale earned his 8th all-star honor, his first since 2018. Marcell Ozuna makes it for the 3rd time, his first since 2017. And then there's Reynaldo Lopez, the first-timer, a man who successfully transitioned from the bullpen back to the rotation, and he's been among MLB's leaders in ERA all season long. 3 very worthy candidates, but what a strange ride to see these 3 names and none of last year's crew make it back, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little disappointing that the Braves just haven't been able to duplicate some of that offensive success. But again, on the other hand, it's a great story with Sale and Lopez because you and I discussed several times about how we thought those were 2 of the most underrated moves of the offseason, that not enough people, even in Atlanta, were talking about. How good of a moves those were, and then to see them both put up all-star caliber seasons in the first half. I think it's easy to say that they've exceeded expectations. And then Marcell Ozuna, I mean, he's carried the offense. From day one, he's been the one constant, in this group. And even when he cooled off a little bit, he's still come up with big hits, and he looks like he's heating up again. Excited to see him in the home run derby.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's a little disappointing. I mean, you'd love to see Austin Riley, Matt Olson, some of those guys there. Even I mean, Cunha, Strider. Obviously, seasons were cut short, but I mean, I think we can be happy for the guys that did make it.
Oh, no doubt about it. Some good stories there, certainly for Chris Sale, just getting his career back on track. I'll get more back into him in a moment, and we'll talk about Lopez and the route that he took to become an all-star for the first time. But let's talk about the third man, and I don't mean Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Marcell Ozuna is going to be taking part in the home run derby, as you mentioned, which should be an entertaining opportunity for the man they call the Big Bear. He's no stranger to home runs. He ranks 2nd in the National League and 4th in Major League Baseball as of Wednesday's action with 24 home runs on the year. Easily the most on the Braves this season as well, which is another strange story. Chris, you and I have watched this guy take a lot of BP at Truist Park, and he's certainly someone who can send a baseball into orbit or the far reaches of whatever ballpark he's hitting in. I think he's got as good a chance as anybody.
I do too, and I thought it was interesting. I think he told David O'Brien during that slump that he started trying to hit home runs, And once he stopped, he started hitting them again, so that's going to be an interesting dynamic also. But we also know that home run derby, they're not going to be swinging some of these baseballs that look like wet socks either. So these things are probably going to be jumping there. And I mean, if he can, I like the new format's going to be interesting a little bit, some of the new rules, but I agree with you. I think he's got as much power as anybody. And if he can get on a roll, I think he's a guy to keep an eye on.
What's that old saying? Get hot at the right time. I feel like we're going to use that one a lot this year, but be that
Yep.
as it may. Also heading to the All-Star game in Arlington, Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez, both big stories and huge reasons why the Braves have been able to maintain a pace of about 10 games over 500, despite the fact that a lot of that was set up for them back in April, they being the Braves. But both of these guys have delivered in rotation, and they certainly needed somebody to, did the Braves, after losing Spencer Strider after just 2 starts. Sale looks like, I feel like, the Cy Young favorite in the National League. If you disagree or want to argue about it, he's definitely on the short list of top candidates. I know there are plenty of people who wondered if the Braves were making the right move by acquiring a pitcher with such an injury history, an extensive one, but Sale has rewarded Atlanta for its investment and is showing that he still has plenty left in the tank.
I think he's exceeded everybody's expectations. I mean, we heard him talk during the offseason that he was healthy at this time. And I think you got to credit the Braves for doing their homework. I think they really thought that he might be healthy, and especially when they went out and gave him the extension ahead of time too. So, he looks like vintage Chris Sale at this point. And I agree with you. I think if he's not the Cy Young favorite in the NL, he's got to be in the short list. And if he can finish strong in the second half, I think he's got a good shot at it.
Yeah, he does. And this is something surprise. It's an award that he has not won before. So that would be
Uh-huh.
quite a fascinating little tale for Chris Sale in his first year and at this stage of his career, and rolling into a chapter in which I think a lot of people around baseball were surprised that he was dealt. I think Chris Sale was surprised that he got traded by the Red Sox as well. But as it turned out, this has been a mutually beneficial arrangement for both Sale and the Braves. Lopez, meanwhile, a little bit of a different story, and he took a circuitous route, to put it lightly, to his first All-Star game. He broke in as a starter, then he struggled, then he moved to the bullpen where he excelled, but he bet on himself to move back into rotation, signing with Atlanta, securing that opportunity to become a starting pitcher again. He owns a 171 ERA this year. That is not a typo. It is the All-Star break, and he is sitting on the best ERA in baseball, though he is just outside the innings threshold to lead MLB in that category. He jumps onto and off that leaderboard basically every time he starts, but he's right there. You can trust me on that. And regardless, he has been more than anyone could have reasonably expected as a starter. And now he gets his first All-Star honors. This is just one of those cool stories that a baseball season brings to you. And Reynaldo Lopez, certainly worthy.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, just a great story of a guy that believed in himself and thought that, he had progressed enough to be successful in the rotation. I think you got to credit the Braves for giving him a chance too. I kind of thought it was a crazy move. I think we talked about that here. Because I liked that 100-mile-an-hour stuff coming out of the bullpen. But the minute Spencer Strider went down, Lopez as a starter
Yeah.
became that much more important. I mean, it's kind of scary to think about this rotation if Strider wasn't hurt and Lopez might be your fifth guy or Charlie Morton's your fifth guy. I mean, that's kind of crazy to think about. But I mean, I don't think enough can be said. I think the Braves have done a great job limiting his innings, because that's the only thing you have to worry about with him. It appears is just that him wearing down after operating as a reliever for the last few seasons. I think I think 66 innings last year, and he's already well above that. So that's something you got to monitor, because you want this guy rested and fresh when you get to the postseason.
Yeah, pushing 90 innings in the first half, just under. So it will be interesting to see how the Braves manage that, even in this upcoming Padres series as well, where he is not listed as a probable starter just yet. The Braves have lined up some of the rest of that, and we'll get to it in a moment, but we might as well go ahead and talk about the Padres. This is the final stop for the Braves in the first half, and on this 2-city road trip, another wild card contender, postseason hopeful, but a recent skid dropped San Diego out of a wild card spot for the moment. The Braves have, of course, the top wild card spot. Then it's the St. Louis Cardinals and the surging New York Mets are the 3 wild card teams in the National League heading into Thursday's action. The Padres, though, one of many clubs that could be looking for help at the trade deadline, obviously. But that's a list, Chris, that I looked at that includes 6 teams within 4 games of the final wild card spot. So buyers and sellers we don't know what to expect just yet as far as those teams. Some big decisions still to be made. As for the series, it seems like an opportunity for both of these clubs to close out what has been a challenging first half in different ways for both clubs while looking to give themselves all the momentum they need for a push at the postseason.
Yeah, and I mean, I just talked about how I feel like the Braves really need to kind of build some momentum. If you can get a series win in Arizona and then turn around and get another one in San Diego, I think that's pretty good. The Braves, I don't have it in front of me, but it feels like the Braves haven't historically played really well in San Diego. So, I think that's a test for them going in. But as you mentioned about, the wide open nature of the National League playoff picture, I mean, it could really muddy up the trade deadline. It'll be
Mhm.
interesting to see how many of these teams that might be in contention don't believe they have a good chance. I think about what Cleveland did last year. They weren't mathematically that far out of the race, but went ahead and sold, and it's paid off for them this season. So some interesting decisions to be made. These games in the lead up to the trade deadline are going to be fascinating to watch because they're big, just because it might define which direction a franchise goes in.
Yeah, and what is the threshold for these teams? I mean, in the message that they send their fan base, if you're within 3 games of a wild card, can you really afford to punt and to let it go? I don't know about that. It's going to be difficult for some decision makers there, but that goes with the territory. As for this series, the Braves are going to throw Spencer Schwellenbach in game one. He's been announced. They have not gone with a game two starter yet. Previously said Chris Sale would go on Sunday in San Diego. And the Padres have lined up Randy Vasquez in the opener, Matt Waldron, Dylan Cease to follow in this 3-game set. Padres took 3 out of 4 at Truist Park, a series in which Atlanta was outscored 18-10 in the midst of what was the biggest and probably worst struggles we've seen at the plate for the Braves in quite some time. Atlanta would no doubt like to issue a bit of a receipt as they roll into Petco Park on Friday.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you want to see them play better because when they played them the first time, it was kind of ugly. So, just see them bounce back. It will be interesting to see how they handle the rotation with the open spot. I wondered if they might consider a bullpen game if they get there that way. But of course, with Brian Snicker's favorite saying is, "We'll see how we get there," and make that decision. So I'm sure they've got a couple of things that they're probably considering. But I think if you can stay away from Lopez, that's great, and maybe he gets to pitch an inning in the All-Star game. That would be really cool because I think with Sale starting Sunday, he won't be eligible. So
Yeah.
we'll just have to see how that turns out.
Yeah, and I agree. It would be cool to see Reynaldo Lopez just get that opportunity to pitch in an all-star game because who knows if he'll ever get back to another one. And he knows a thing or two about coming in to throw just one inning. Maybe that's something he could do in that setting. Either way, the Braves are going to wrap up the first half here this weekend, and we will have a lot more to be talking about as we move forward. Of course, now part of the All-Star festivities is the Major League Baseball draft. Don't ask me why, but it's all been centralized to one time of the year to make basically journalists and reporters in the sport lose their collective minds in trying to cover everything at once. It's overstimulation, to say the very least, but we'll have you covered right here on Battery Power and, of course, over batterypower.com. That does, however, bring us to the end of this edition of BPTV. Make sure you hit that subscribe button right here on the YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications. You'll get an alert every time we drop a new episode. We thank you as always for riding along with us. He's Chris Willis. I'm Grant McCauley. We will catch you next time. And until then, so long, Braves Country.